And yeah, I'm afraid with a published agenda start time, I'm not sure how to alter it.
Yeah.
I think we just roll with it.
Yeah, I agree. The pros and cons of having the meetings near each other. Yeah, I'm afraid with a published agenda start time, I'm not sure how to alter it.
Yeah.
It seems we are streaming.
We are. There's a lag between when we begin the publishing and then I need to hit pause. Otherwise, we'll hear the audio on my computer as we're meeting. And so there's a moment where I need to catch it to pause. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but live.
Well, thank you, Gretchen, for starting the meeting. I'll go ahead and get us started. I'm Mike Waters, and I'm the chair of the LGBTQIA plus Intersectional Rights Task Force for the City of Salem Human Rights Commission. My pronouns are they and them, and I live in Ward 7, and I will let Kathy introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Kathy Ostrand-Punch, and I'm also a member of the task force. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a resident of South Salem. And I'll pass it to Gretchen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gretchen Bennett. Pronouns are she, her, and I am staff to the commission this evening.
Well, as we were getting on the Zoom today, I mentioned that it would probably be a pretty short meeting, but we'll go ahead and go through all the agenda items and talk about them as much as we need to, but hope for a larger group at our next get together. Did we have any public comment, Gretchen?
No.
All right. And then we cannot approve minutes today, I don't think, because of quorum. We've just got 2 out of 4.
Correct.
So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the Trans Day of Remembrance, and maybe we can talk about it again when we have a larger group. But was there anything we wanted to kind of capture for tonight? Other than I just thought everybody involved did a really great job with their parts, and we seem to get a little bit better at the organizational piece. Oh, Byron's here.
Hello.
Hello, Byron.
How are you all doing?
Great. It's great to see you. Let's go back a step since you have joined us. And did everyone get a chance to look at the minutes? And Byron, I'm sorry, would you like to introduce yourself? We already did that part.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, hello, folks. Name is Byron Kimball. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am a resident of Ward 5.
Awesome. Well, yeah, if anybody read the minutes and would like to, I would certainly entertain a motion to pass the minutes.
I'll make a motion to pass the minutes.
And I see Byron raising his hand in a motion to second.
Yep, that's correct. Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it passes. Good deal. Well, while Byron's fixing his backdrop, let's go ahead and talk about Trans Day of Remembrance. I was just mentioning when you got on the call that I thought that everybody involved did a really great job as usual. We didn't have super high attendance online, but of course it was online. And of course the big dream is that we can do this event again as a community, so that we have the opportunity in person to see one another and have that community time after that we had. So those were my impressions. Was curious if you had other thoughts, highs and lows, or things you might that we might want to consider doing differently next time.
I think it went really well. Do we know how many people tuned in to watch the event?
I flipped it on during the event and it was like 20 or 30 watching it live.
Oh, okay. That's still quite a good number, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I guess a question on that point. Do we have a comparison versus last year?
I think that's up without having a number written down. I think that's up from last year. I also might be able to go in and look at how many views has occurred to see if any additional views were caught, since people can come back and look at it later
Mhm.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm wondering if our if maybe if our revised time and you may have contributed. Because as you all recall, last year, I believe the event was originally an hour long, couple hours, and we ended early.
Yeah. Yeah, it could have.
Whereas this year, we kept it to more of a clip. That being said, I echo Kathy in that viewing in, not actively reading names this year, I thought it went very well.
I had a note, and I can't recall if this was discussed right after the meeting or if it was a note later that someone gave me, but I received a suggestion to entertain adding a written scroll of the names in the countries.
That's right. It was our wonderful interpreter, whose name escapes me, but it was her who had that idea, and I thought that was a really good idea.
Mhm.
You could, and even if it was in person, you could see the value of projecting the names so that people could see them. If they missed one, they would be able to see how it's written. I thought that was a really good suggestion as well.
Mhm.
Great, I'll make a note. And then let's see, there was a question about, should we try to slow down for the ASL interpretation a little bit too? That was another note from last time.
Yeah, I think that's the case, because I think her hands were moving nonstop during that, as well as providing the ASL person with the written document.
Mhm.
That might help as well, so they can, know what they're signing.
We did do that. And
Oh,
so
good.
they had that in advance, but yeah.
But
I
the
think,
readers need to be a little slow.
I think
slower.
names, don't they necessitate like a movement for each
Yeah.
letter as opposed to, I guess that's
Yeah.
always true. Sorry, dumb question. I don't know.
Unless you're like, I think some people like Tricarico have a sign they've made, but with that exception. Well, Byron, you have background in ASL, is that right?
Unfortunately, no,
No.
I do not. But from friends and folks I know in the community who do, I believe that that's the case. Like where a lot of folks have like have what's called a name sign,
Mhm.
where it's sign created to represent their name. However, that's not the case for I think in a lot of other cases that's
Yeah.
Name signs aren't used unless one is created or thought of.
Well, good. When do you want to see it on the agenda next? Would you want to start, I suppose, August, September-ish? August, maybe?
Maybe even July.
Okay.
Just because if it does become an in-person event for 2023 or 2022, I'm already ahead. But if it does become an in-person event, it does take a little extra coordination at that point. And I think it would be good to talk about it earlier. I think we had intended to talk about it earlier this year, and for whatever reason, it felt like we didn't get to it till maybe September, and it was almost a tad late because I know Byron had to do very quick work on the flyer, and we just barely got it out there the week of. So
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely echo that as well. I can definitely see like maybe August like being a time to. I mean, assuming and granted, we know how that's gone, that we will be meeting in person, hopefully. I mean, that would give us enough time to update the poster and double check on the venue, depending on how far out we need to coordinate with the library or whoever we choose to work with next year.
Yeah.
Very good.
And can we talk about how pretty the poster was this year? It was so nice. And Kathy and I got the pleasure of handing them out, and people were very excited to receive them. My favorite moment was when there were a few that were printed that were very oversized. And we didn't know what we could do with them. But there was one particular bulletin board where we had enough room to put up the big one, and it was awesome. So kudos to you on that poster. It was just great.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, it was very nice.
Any other thoughts on TDOR, things to remember for next year? We'll have hopefully plenty of planning time.
I can't think of anything else.
Well, before this meeting, Gretchen sent us some documents. Let's see, what time was that? Around noon today, you should have received some documents for the Safe Spaces program. There's a resource sketch, kind of the description that we've worked with for a while, and then the timeline was also attached. Do you have Gretchen, are you able to walk us through what may be new or different on these documents from the last time we saw them?
Thank you. I would be happy to. And before I do that, one quick question is coming to mind, if you don't mind, a quick clarification. Do you think that you want the title of the program to be Safe Space singular or Safe Spaces plural? It's occurring to me that it's inconsistent in the documents. And you don't have to know that now, but I guess I just noticed it and I wanted to flag it so that we can fix it one way or the other.
Well, let's talk about it, about what the best word is. I think maybe spaces.
That was my first instinct, but I was thinking about it. I think spaces.
Great. Okay. Spaces
Spaces
is.
it is.
Great. I will make the corrections. Let's see, on the document, which is kind of the program description, the only change that is from before was from a few meetings ago. The group decided to remove the word training as part of what we offer, in kind of recognition of our scope versus the scope of the hired consultants that could be available for folks. So we removed the word training from this document. We talk about providing information, but so that's a change on the first document. I did not make any changes to the resource guide sketch, so I believe you've seen this before, but I did make quite a few changes to the timeline, reflecting the decision in November of 2021 that the Human Rights Commission adopted your recommendation.
Great.
And have for you tonight, the December task is around refining the draft and the resource guide. I thought this would be a good opportunity to look over things and see if it's meeting the mark or if you're seeing things that are missing. And then I tried to play out a little bit how it would work from here, but there were several questions. So this is truly a draft for you to react to. I tried to lay out, for example, in January, perhaps we would publish a web page for the Safe Spaces project that includes the description and the resources, and then begin to notify the organizations to begin to get some of that initial feedback that we had talked about earlier. I had checked in with colleagues at Urban Development and was given the suggestion that the Main Street organization downtown and the Salem Area Chamber of Commerce would be two examples of organizations we could connect with to see if there's public benefit and also private sector locations that manage spaces that are available to the public that might want to do some initial sort of check in with us about here's what we have planned, here's the concept, here are the resources, you know, kind of what's missing from your perspective as an organizational owner. And then in February, No, I also have the initiating of the decal development. We haven't gotten started yet on a formal process for procuring the design of the decals. So I thought that could also begin in January. And then I imagine February, March, April is really, receiving that decal design, having conversations with potential participants about what works, what doesn't work, refining our program description and our resource sketch. Then we come to a point where we would order the decals, we would share the image on the web page, and then I had a note that the committee was interested in launching in conjunction with Pride Month. So perhaps by June, we'd be ready for kind of a formal launch and sign up. But there's several assumptions in this timeline that you might think about, like is running the parallel process of feedback and decal development workable? Is it good to get some information posted on the web page early, or is that premature? Do we want to do, kind of offer the materials to organizations that might give us feedback in a way that's not published yet, so that we have a chance to refine? So I guess there's a couple of questions in this I wasn't sure of that I would offer for discussion tonight.
Thank you so much for that update. What do y'all think?
Well, as far as initial thoughts on the timeline, I'm in, for the most part, agreement about when we want to begin outreach and when we want to start looking into decals. I think the only thing that I'm maybe wanting a little more lead time would be, without the context of how long it usually takes us to pull things through or whatnot. Like, how much lead time will we need for some of this organizational outreach?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly within a week, key persons could be contacted via phone or email. And then the question just becomes, in what way would they want to engage? Like, would they want to invite members of the task force and staff to come to a meeting, for example, and that might take a month or so to schedule, to get it on an agenda. So that could build it out longer. So I suppose it depends on how the group or organization wants to engage with it.
No, that makes sense. Thank you, Gretchen.
Yeah. And then I suppose to add to that, if they have significant and substantive feedback that you want to incorporate, that could delay preparing the resources, the materials, or if there's really no substantive changes, then it's pretty quick. I suppose it depends.
When I look at the timeline, it looks fine to me. I'd be in favor of putting something on the website sooner to let people know that it's in development. I think if we don't publish something until we're ready to go, I don't know. I feel like there's no harm in doing that. And then people, if they do hear about it, they'll have maybe some context for what we're working on. And it's already been approved by the full commission, so I think it's fine. I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I echo what both of you have said, which is I think that timeline seems really reasonable, with the caveats that Gretchen mentioned, which is that if we get more feedback, we may take more time. I don't think that we have to be married to the June launch, and I don't think it particularly has to be Pride Month or anything connected to LGBTQIA plus community, because the program is for all communities. So I don't think there's any specific timing that it needs to be. It needs to just not run into the timing of something else that's happening. So, you know, if there's some other big HRC happening around one of your other initiatives like Equity Asks or Chapter 97 or one of those, I would want us to think about how this probably doesn't launch at the same time as some of those important things. But aside from that, I really think it seems doable.
Mhm. Yeah.
Do we know if there's anything planned for, say, July or August? I'm trying to think if there's any like recognitions or awareness events
Well,
around the time of year.
we actually are doing our awareness task force meeting at 7. And I happen to have, I think Gretchen sent us a communication plan draft. So let's take a look.
Well, yeah, like I mean, I would say like if we can try to align it to, or in this case, not align to like a major initiative like around the communications plan, then I would say that would be what I'd be in favor of.
Yeah, most of the events in the summer are just those recognition events. In June, you have Sikh Pride, World Beat, Juneteenth, and LGBTQIA plus Pride. In July, there's a recognition of the ADA anniversary of passage. The International Day of Friendship is in July. And then if there's a discrimination survey done next year, that could be launching in July, and you wouldn't want to run into that. August is Salem's recognition of Pride is in August. Micronesian Islander event is sometimes in August, sometimes in September or October. And then Women's Equality Day also is in August. So there are recognition events, but it doesn't seem, according to this draft plan that we have, it doesn't seem like there's anything major launching at those times.
Well, if I can play maybe if I can almost kind of go back on a previous statement or almost play devil's advocate in a way, now that we consider that June's also a month where we recognize the World Beat Festival, Juneteenth, LGBTQ Pride.
Might be a good time.
Sikh awareness. Exactly. Like I think, the fact that it's not exclusively LGBT Pride, like during June, like that would say to me, I think there's a natural opportunity for us to recognize multiple cultures, multiple groups. And that would leave us the possibility of promoting the Safe Spaces Project during August for Salem's own LGBTQ Pride and some of the other events like throughout June, July.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you raise a good point, Byron, because it's not a one or done on promoting this thing. So once we launch it, the launch date almost matters less than our plan to promote it, beyond that. So really good point.
In fact, Mike, maybe that's an agenda item for the awareness task force, is to think about what would the communications promotion plan involve. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it could very well be. It could be that this group makes some recommendations there, but then if you still have an awareness task force next year,
right,
then we could pass it along to them or to the broader HRC, either way.
Yeah. Well, it might make sense then if we started to think about the tasks for January. Would you see any refinements to the description and the resource list, or would you see these as appropriate for the city to build a web page from?
Let me pull it up now.
I might be able to get I can't remember, but I think that they can do a web page in sort of a way for you to look at it before it goes live. So I might be able to get a link that is drafted, but not yet ready to publish, and invite your feedback before it's published. I don't know what that's called, but I believe they can do that.
I think the only thing that would need to change in terms of the description, Gretchen, is that it would need to be written as a program that is coming. Because right now it's written as a description of a program, as though it exists. So it would need some massaging in that way. And then, as you mentioned earlier, the consistency around calling it safe spaces instead of just safe space.
Copy that. I could make those changes.
But I don't know. I think it reads pretty well. What do you all think?
There's a sentence in the very last paragraph that I always kind of trip over. Concerns and complaints will be addressed directly with the point of contact designated by the program. And I'm not sure who that's referring to. Is that the point of contact at the business or organization, or is that the program? I don't know. It's never been clear to me what that means, but the rest of it looks fine.
If my memory serves me, you're right, Kathy. I do think that's unclear. If my memory serves me, I think what that's explaining is maybe what we're going to do with the complaint information. So maybe it's better to be a lot clearer about that. So for example, with our Safe Spaces program on the web, a person might assume, gosh, if I receive a complaint, does that immediately go up on the web before I've had an opportunity to interact with the information? And so, like, let's say I run a small business and a complaint comes in about my shop. What this sentence is trying to say is we're gonna work directly with you if we receive information about a concern. Like, we're not public, we're not declaring that for all of the world to see. We're meaning to bring that information to you directly to problem solve and address it.
That makes sense.
But yeah, so now going back to the sentence, that should be reworked because I don't know how clear that was.
And something else that became apparent when you were speaking, Gretchen, is at the top we've referred to it as a project, and at the bottom it's a program. And so that would be, it seems like it's a program.
I think it's a program,
not a project.
Copy that. We'll change to be consistent program.
Good catch.
So I do have a question about sort of the second from the last tenet under qualification for the Safe Spaces project regarding accessible services. Now, for businesses who, for reasons like due to historical designation, would that preclude them from participating in this program?
Like if their business was not physically accessible because it's like a
that's
store
correct.
building?
Yeah, like either doing to historical designation, making it difficult to install an elevator, for example, or other issues of that nature.
Well, it says provide accessible services as required by law. Be responsive to requests for additional accommodations. That doesn't mean accept additional accommodations. It just means be responsive. And then promote universal access and accommodations to the space as a value of the business. I suppose that second sentence is a little bit more tricky. What do you all think?
Yeah, because I guess that's kind of like sort of where my thinking was around like the second sentence there. And although I do agree there is some flexibility, as far as what's inferred with the first sentence, in that these align with ADA guidance and other state and federal accessibility laws.
I know there's some, you probably know there's some discussion in the ADA about the exceptions around historical properties and the exemptions that historical properties have from completely changing the environment. But yet you still want to like promote the accessibility through other means. Like if you can't put in an elevator, you might have a virtual way of interpreting the second floor of a museum, for example, so that a person could still experience the content from the second floor if they can't physically go upstairs with an elevator, is kind of, I think, how it gets applied. And there will be situations where people haven't been required by law to come into the current building code standards, but are legally compliant based on when their building was built, for example. And this kind of provides that room, I think, for those things. But tries to say, but we're hoping, you know, the spirit of it is find ways to be as accessible as possible, as reasonable.
I wonder if that's a better statement, Gretchen, what you just said, than the second sentence, where you said find ways to be, well, exactly what you said, but I can't repeat it exactly because it in one ear and out the other with me. But I wonder if that's a better way to put it, because what it says right now is promoting universal access and accommodation as a value. And maybe that's a little too heavy-handed for those that may have to have the accommodation be different because of their historical designation, as Byron said.
Great point. So if I
Makes
delete
sense.
that second sentence and write, find ways to be as accessible as possible.
Yeah,
I think that's good.
nice and general, and still gets the point across.
I'm going back to Kathy's question earlier about the last paragraph in that phrase about addressing concerns and complaints directly. And I might need to put some thought into or get some help from a colleague or all of you in knowing exactly how to phrase that. The process is certainly that we, you know, if I get if there's a complaint about my business, like let's say Mike owns a business and there's a complaint, I would call Mike directly and notify Mike of the situation, and we would have a direct conversation. I would not publish that information on the web or, you know, do a news release. Oh, we got a complaint about Mike's business. I mean, that's not the intent and process.
Yeah.
It is true that all of the documents and notes that we have are subject to public meeting law or public records requests. There's also some exemptions if the person would reasonably expect some privacy going into the situation. And so one of the things I'm thinking about is being as precise as I can be on this document about how we would handle those situations. I think if I'm somebody who's running a public space, I'd probably like to understand that really well. So I might want to take some time, I think, with those sentences and make sure I reflect it all accurately.
And your explanation, now I understand what it's saying. So concerns and complaints will be addressed directly with the program participant. You know, the point of contact of the participating business or organization, something along those lines.
Good.
And that's more clear to me than the way it's currently phrased.
Thanks, Kathy.
The process around complaints and concerns is one that we've discussed kind of at length, and I feel like we're kind of trying to stuff it into a little paragraph in this general description, and maybe we need like a separate document almost that just lines it out with the input that you would get from your colleagues, Gretchen, just so that we have it. I don't necessarily think we need to publish it with the description of the program, but we are kind of talking about some pretty general language around what the process will be. And I remember we talked pretty specifically around some of those things, and that we had a kind of a more, do you recall those discussions, Gretchen?
I do, and I'm really liking the idea of lining it out more precisely. I think if I put myself in the shoes of somebody who's a potential program participant, if I manage a space, I think I'd want to understand how the concerns would be processed before I jumped into participating, I think. So I think that's really smart to take the time and the care to create a separate document like you suggested, and then that can be available as maybe if people have questions.
Would that be part of the resource guide, or is that something different? I'm looking at the outline of the resource guide.
It probably
It seems like it
belongs
would be
in
a
the
section
resource
of
guide.
that.
It probably does belong in there because that's the place that they'll go. If I was a participant and I received this guide, I would go to it looking for answers.
Mhm.
That's a
There's
great point. So it might need its own subsection, like, how the program works or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah, I like that.
Another task related to January is launching the decal. When you're ready to move from the resource guide sketch and the program description, we might talk a little bit about some expectations around the decal.
Yeah, so one of the things that we talked about early in this process was whether we wanted to find like a local artist from one of the communities served by the commission. Also kind of had a really good discussion about wanting to make sure that the person got paid for their work. In other words, we didn't want to have a contest or something like that, which sometimes with community programs like this you would do. But in this case, because of the nature of it, we thought it was really important to maybe find an opportunity for somebody in the communities to benefit from providing this work. Do you have ideas, Gretchen, about the best way to conduct that search and make it fair? And
Not yet, other than the simple approach of writing out what we're looking for, clarifying with the city a dollar amount that we can include as what we can provide, and then publishing far and wide. And here's where I'm glad that we've built a nice list of contacts amongst so many different organizations that represent different identities, because that'll be a great tool for spreading the word. So just kind of simply like writing it out, clarifying the budget, and then sharing, and then asking people to respond by a certain deadline, almost a request for proposals.
Mhm.
yeah,
I know the Salem Public Arts Commission, for example, has lined out some detail in the past for, we're looking for this type of art in this type of medium, in this type of size. We want it to include these elements. So I would certainly borrow their expertise on how to line out what the artist might be needing to read to understand what we're scoping.
well, from a print production standpoint, I'd be happy to help with the specs that'll be needed for printing, and Byron could probably help with that too, because Byron's in a similar field. It is a little different from looking for public art because the medium is probably most likely electronic, could be hand drawn, but would still need to be rendered electronically for production, things like that. But I really like that idea of doing a call. I know there's a simpler format than an RFP that's like we use sometimes at my work called an invitation to bid, which is a much simpler, like the person can just, sort of put the barest sketches of what they do and a price rather than having to drop a full proposal, because that is pretty laborious as well. But I don't know if the city has an option like that around an invitation to bid or something where we could just take, and then we had talked about as well, and I don't know if the city is open to this, about, kind of looking at maybe refreshing it pretty regularly. And that could be different artists each year. It could be the same artist refreshing it. I don't know. But that's another possibility.
I remember that. I think there was a talk of an annual flow to that. And then as program participants renewed, they would get the new decal.
Yeah, and it could be kind of a cool thing where they collect them all a little bit. Like, I think that's really common. Like, if you started the program in 2021 and you were a proud member till 2045, you'd have all these cool decals from over the years.
Totally.
Kathy and I were noticing quite a lot of rainbow decals out. And we thought those would be good businesses when we get the program up and running to go talk to. It was neat.
How about the content of it? I think another early conversation was around maybe rotating what we would feature each year. Like, there might be a particular identity in one year and a different one in another year. How would you go about selecting what our launch is? Or would the launch be a little more general, for example? Or would you select one for this year to start with? Or is that part of what we'd invite the artists to share ideas on?
I don't know. It seems like a really hard design exercise. I was thinking about this very early on, because I was thinking these types of programs can sometimes lend themselves to the kitchen sink approach to design, which is almost like the worst kinds of design you can do. And yet, I don't know. I think it maybe does depend a little bit on the artist's vision, but I think probably it should be pretty general for the first year. It shouldn't be tied to just one identity.
My concern with that would be members of the public or whoever is needing the safe space, not knowing, well, that's not my identity, so I'm not sure if that's a place I'd mind not recognizing that it's open, that it's intended to be inclusive. If that makes any sense.
I kind of wondered what kind of information the decal could carry. For example, it would say Safe Spaces Project on it somewhere, and it would say City of Salem on it somewhere. Yeah. So you would have those two clues.
Yeah.
I wondered whether the decal could include like a URL perhaps that has a description of the program, a QR code perhaps, although that starts making, the more things you add, the uglier this decal becomes. And I have a lot of compassion for my designers friends in the world, because I've been there, but it does seem like there's got to be some things on it that signal what it is in a pretty clear way. And in addition to the artwork, the wording on it should drive a little bit of it too. I agree with you, Kathy, though. It's a challenge.
Yeah, I'm almost wondering if, to alleviate that, if we might consider, in the first couple of years of launch, providing additional materials, to participating businesses that can be handed out to folks.
Oh, like
pamphlets,
flyers,
pamphlets, brochures. Maybe the city does. You considers, putting out a statement or media at some point.
I love that. Actually, I feel like you could have a little booklet or a little pamphlet that says we are a safe space, and that means, and then you could literally have the bulleted list from our program document, and it would be a great, like this, I think the businesses would love putting that out because it would be talking about their values.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
at
a great
some
idea.
point, depending on, we get up and running and we have these out, at some point, maybe year 2, we update brochures and handouts with a list of all the participating businesses. So you get a little bit of advertising, mixed in as well.
Ooh,
Mhm.
So you
That's
build
really
into
good.
the advertising and awareness aspect of participating in the program.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
really good.
Yeah, a benefit of the program, you get your business listed in the list of participating organizations. Yeah.
Which we would, each organization could get a stack of those pamphlets, but also it could be at the tabling for HRC. So it would make its way around the city to different events.
Mhm.
You'd see those pamphlets at Pride. You'd see them. I mean, you could really see this being a great opportunity for businesses. And you could see a business picking up this pamphlet and saying, well, why am I not on this pamphlet? I need to join this program.
Mhm.
I love that. Wow.
Well, as I think about the conversation, I think we have the idea to create a couple of things. And one is that brochure or fact sheet that really good idea that was just described that would have some more text, like we're a safe space, here's what that means. And then the list of participating organizations and businesses. And then in addition, a decal that could be displayed in the window. And the decal would include, it would say, Safe Spaces Program, city logo. It would have a artwork that is intended to be inclusive to multiple identities, and maybe plus or minus a QR code. I don't know if we made a decision on whether that fits the logo or if the brochure fact sheet really makes that not necessary.
Well, I would say, I would avoid, decal, I'd be hesitant about putting that in just due to space, due to
I agree.
size constraints. But if we decide that the brochure would be appropriate, I don't see why we couldn't have additional information made available with the QR code put in there.
Yeah,
And
given
you
all of the
could-
links.
You could have a URL. You could fit a URL small on a decal if you got a shortcut URL like cityofsalem.net/safe spaces, something like that. If your IT team could put together a short URL like that, you could still include that even on the decal if it was small. But I agree with Byron. We don't want to clutter this thing up, and we don't want to frustrate the artist right out the gate. Here, take our impossible project. Enjoy.
Well, good. That gives me some information to work with as I imagine kind of trying to take the next steps of putting something together. So I could work on what that launch would look like for, communicating with potential artists. And
I have one comment about the resource guide. Is it okay if I go back there for a minute?
for sure.
So on the outline, and I don't remember seeing the outline before. Maybe I have, and I just don't recall. But at the bottom, when it says resources suggested but not yet developed, and then the first one is a simple primer on Chapter 97. I think it would be important to have something in there, and maybe that's what it's intended, because one of the expectations of the participants is that they abide by all laws set forth in Chapter 97. And so I think we need to make it real clear to them what those are. I'm not sure people are necessarily aware of what they're supposed to be doing anyways.
That's a really good point. And I actually think in addition to the simple primer, that probably the full Chapter 97 probably should be in there because they are agreeing to adhere to it.
Yeah. The full chapter, but also a
Like a
simple
bullet. Yeah,
simple outline of here's what all it says that you need to be doing as a business in the city of Salem. Yeah.
that's great.
Got it.
I love it though.
Oh, actually, chapter 97 is listed under the links to online resources.
Yeah, it is already
Um,
there.
But I agree that a primer is really important.
It's been a really productive conversation. I mean, the more we talk, the more ideas we get. And it sounds great.
Yeah, this has been wonderful. Well, I was thinking that we were going to have the short meeting. We weren't even going to be able to we were going to have an hour until our awareness meeting, but it's flown by, hasn't it?
It has.
Anything else on safe spaces that we want to dig into tonight?
Well, with the caveat that we are coming up on your next meeting and the end of this one, I would say I don't have any major feedback as far as the materials presented here tonight. Kathy, how about you?
Aside from what we've talked about.
I think I've got a quick question. As I imagine the idea of going ahead and publishing some information on our webpage next month, I'm having mixed thoughts about how quickly that primer can be put together about what are people supposed to be doing. On the one hand, I think that ought to be pretty easy. And on the other hand, I think about the risk of missing something or the challenges that might come from simplifying language. And I get less confident that something like that is producible quickly. And so my question becomes, do you think that it would be good to hold publishing? Because as I think about it, that's a pretty helpful document versus go ahead and publish, but then add as we get that online. And again, I don't know, but I thought since I'm not going to see it for another month, I should ask your input on that. It might be a quicker build than I'm wondering. I'm not sure.
I think perhaps Gretchen, you could take a stab at it, and then if it doesn't go in January, I think we'll be able to talk about it at our next meeting and figure out at that point what it might need to go.
Yeah.
Or, I'm still, I think we're still early enough that publishing it fairly early in the year, like in Q1, as we say in the insurance world, would probably be very sufficient for getting that early peak that we're hoping people get. That would be my thought about it, would be, because I get what you're saying. You don't know how long it'll take until you sit down and do it.
Yeah.
Or what questions will come up.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Well, I can be at work on it, and then, like, to me, ideally, I would have a link to you that includes that primer that is drafted but not yet published, but in the format of a web page. So you can click on the link and view it and give me your feedback on the documents and the text, but I don't yet have it published. So that gives us a chance to really talk it through at the next task force meeting.
Great.
That strikes me as what would be helpful. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be ideal.
Okay.
And Mike, we still have you on as the task force in the next year, right?
Assuming that HRC wants to continue the task force, I told Angelo that I would be willing to chair, assuming you all still want me as the chair. If HRC wants the task force but doesn't want me as the chair, or they don't want the task force or whatever, that's all up to HRC, but I'm game. So, and it sounds like that was where Angela was leaning, and but it will be up to the full task force to discuss, or for the full HRC to discuss. Yeah.
Well, I'm in favor of you staying on as the chair of the task
Good,
force
me
into
too.
next year. So.
Well, and you, regardless of whether I'm chair, I don't think I want to get kicked off the committee. Like, if they want a different chair because they want somebody who can report back at the HRC meetings, that's fine, but I'll still stick around.
Yeah, you have to. We have this big project now that we have to
I know.
see through.
That's why I wanted to stick around, part of it.
Yeah.
And just because I enjoy seeing you all. Hey, we're 2 minutes to the end. Do we have any member remarks or announcements? Okay, well, let's jolt, because we've got another meeting and I've got to take just a quick break. It's great to see everybody.